How are you, buddy?
Hello, Sam. I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, how are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. The voice is going, but we're still here. We're doing all right.
I was going to say complete kudos to my friend for doing it. I mean, by that stage, I don't think I'd have a voice left. Your energy and everything seems to be amazing at this stage still. And what,
Mate,
what time is it? It's back here. So it's 4 a.m. back in the UK, right?
just come up to 4:30. So we've been going since 12. I'd like to say on the hour every hour. We're running slightly behind on this one. The last guy, unfortunately, Bobby, he's in Dubai at the moment, but just got the times a bit mixed up. He ended up jumping on at just after 3:30, so we just pushed back slightly. But so apologies, mate. Apologies. I know you're in the airport. What time's your flight?
Flight leaving about an hour, so we're pretty good on time actually.
Mate, we're good. Mate. Listen, I'm so grateful. Thanks so much for jumping on, mate. You're a legend.
Absolutely no worries. I kind of back the idea when exactly when you kind of pitched it to me, and I know we're going to talk about podcasting and everything. So kudos for doing this. But yeah, let me know when you want to kind of get started and happy to crack on.
Let's crack on. Let's do it. So just tell the listeners a little bit about your story, your career.
Yeah, I mean, sort of like where to start. I guess went to Exeter University back in. You say back in, it makes you sound really old, doesn't it? But like 2002 to 2005. Never sort of envisaged having a career kind of down the sustainability route. Was always a sort of creative guy and read English, and then kind of went on to do my journalism training in London with PMA to kind of convert it, and kind of went really down the publishing route. There was my parents come from a village that absolutely no one will ever have heard of called Stapleford in this county called Wiltshire, and there's a local publishing house there called Atlantean Media. So as a kind of graduate, a bit wet behind the ears, looked for where there was local employment and kind of got a job in the warehouse of the media company, and it was kind of stuffing envelopes, database management, and I just thought I liked where that company was going and some of the titles it had, and so it was a kind of foot in the door, an opportunity, and then sort of got to know the MD, a guy called Mark Allen. He still runs the Mark Allen Group today. I think he's probably in his 70s and as sharp as he is now as what he was back then. And then gradually kind of just worked my way up. And at the time, there was an opportunity for a really sexy sounding magazine, right? Recycling and Waste World, for an editorial assistant. So, I had these dreams of going on to be the editor of Stuff magazine or FHM, and then, lo and behold, at a university, I was like, okay, I'm on Recycling and Waste World. But anyway, it was a time kind of from editorial assistant, worked my way up to eventually become the editor, and that was around 2008. That market was sort of booming, and the UK recycling rate had really increased, and there was a chance to kind of help, I think, put the magazine and the topic on the main stage. So a lot of the nationals were starting to write about this topic of exporting waste and recycling. So I managed to kind of get quoted in a few of the articles and really get to know that market pretty well. And I mean, as well as being that creative guy, so I'm quite a kind of tech geek. So I like to know how things work, how things are engineered. So naturally, that part of the business really stood out to me. But to kind of cut a long story short, wanted to go traveling for a couple of years with my now wife, and we wanted to kind of backpack around Europe. And at the time, this was kind of moving from the country, and she was based around Brighton, hence for why I'm now based around there and met you in Worthing, Sam. And at the time, the managing director said, look, do your thing. I'm sure he's had young guys come to him before and say, look, I want to go traveling. And he said, I'll come and work for me in London afterwards. So it was a chance to sort of do a 2-month sabbatical, backpacking, interrailing, come back to a job just when the economy was tanking. So that's quite a nice position to be in. And then, after backpacking around 12 different countries, I relocated to Portslade, and then did the whole commuting thing for 2 years up to Dulwich in South London. At the time, the business was kind of getting more into that sustainability field, so we actually launched a monthly publication called Sustainable Solutions that I also worked on. and did that for about 2 years until a big American company got in touch. I'd never really heard of them, called Penwell, but they were really involved in the water market. At the time in North America, they had this big franchise called Waterworld magazine. They said, look, we're looking for someone, journalist, has got experience in sustainability, waste and recycling, to come and sort of head out our international division. So that was back at the end of 2009. And so I joined in 2010. Another really glamorously named magazine, Water and Wastewater International, seemed to be, again, attracted down that route. But anyway, that was for about 8.5 years. Was amazing. I mean, kind of basically covering the kind of the international beat of water management and looking at water scarcity and the impacts of climate change around the world, and just getting to know. I mean, we had a time where we were building an event in the Middle East, and I hadn't really sort of experienced or even been to the Middle East before that. So very quickly, at the age of sort of 25, I found myself over in Doha, Qatar, running a sort of advisory board meeting full of local Qataris and Middle Eastern professionals at that sort of young age, and trying to build an event. So that was quite an amazing experience. But I think for them, that really opened my eyes.
Okay, what's your mindset, man, at 25 years old, going out to a place like that and hosting?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like sink or swim, right? I had absolutely no choice but to kind of go and learn from some of the conference directors at the time, and just something I'm going to come on to later is just overly prepare, man. I mean, I knew that I wasn't a technical engineer. I knew I hadn't worked in the Middle East for years. I was a young guy here to kind of build and run a conference. I knew that it was a really seasoned senior advisory board, so I didn't want to try and blag my way through it. So I thought I'm just going to research, do as much kind of reading up on the flight over beforehand, to at least kind of have a bit of a grasp, to know the topic, the issues, and I wasn't there for the expertise on the industry. We had consultants and utility managers there for their expertise. It was my job really as the orchestrator to kind of get the best out of all these experts and make sure we had the best conference program. So we did that, and for a couple of years, and we moved the event to the Emirates, to the United Arab Emirates, to Abu Dhabi. So I spent a lot of time kind of backwards and forwards from the UK to the Middle East, trying to help to build up that conference franchise, which was really interesting. And then, so again, to cut quite a long story short, we got to about 2018, and you think everything is going well, 2 small, beautiful children, bills to pay, responsibilities, and you think, life's good, I'm happy here. And then you kind of hear that the company's being taken over. And you kind of think, okay, I've worked really hard. My job will be safe. You think in these big, and it's the first time, as again, fairly young, and a bit wet behind the ears, of going through a company acquisition. And you kind of think a bit naively, I guess, that everything will be great. And then all of a sudden, you hear of things being shut down. You get a phone call from HR, we need you in the office on Friday, before you find out that you're at risk of redundancy. So that was kind of a big hit to kind of stomach. So this was, I guess, 8.5 years into really covering and getting to know the water sector. So I kind of saw it as an opportunity, right? If I don't kind of do my own thing now, I'm potentially never going to do it, right? I mean, I kind of had a pretty good network, pretty good experience, I guess, young enough to have the energy to put in the hard graft, as to kind of make it all work. And so we went through this redundancy interview, and I was literally at the time looking at it as two-way. I thought, okay, well, I'm being interviewed, but at the same time, I'm actually interviewing the new company that bought the old company, just to find out about the values, the purpose, the culture. Is it somewhere that I would fit in as an individual? And kind of very quickly through that stage, figured that it wasn't. So there was the option, take the redundancy, and for the purpose of being on the record, I won't say how much what it was, but it was pretty pathetic for about 8.5 years of service. Not enough. And then, or take a job in the new company. And I kind of at the time took that riskier decision. I thought, right, if I don't do it now, I had an idea of what I wanted to do in this kind of market, I think, that was underserved, with people that could communicate creatively and create content. And it's very easy at that time to take the safer option, right? To take the job on the same salary with the new company and just carry on having that monthly salary with pretty big responsibilities. And probably I'd say 75%.
How old were the kids? How old were your kids at that time?
So that was 2018. So Imogen was 2011. So yeah, 7 and 4 at the time. 7 and 4, yeah. And so I'd say 75% of the people, like friends, the people that's the boarding call. If you hear a boarding call for my name, just give me a shout and I'll get running.
Yeah, mate.
You can imagine, attention, Mr. Freyberg, please make your way to the plane. Okay, I'm finishing the podcast. Give me some time. But anyway, and I'd say like 75% of the people I consulted, Sam, kind of erred on the side of caution and said, no, you've got a job there. Why would you take the risk? And so I listened. I think there were a couple of voices. Like one was a really, really like one of my best friends today who made the leap and now runs a successful CrossFit franchise. And he said, instead of thinking about what could go wrong, think about what could go right. And that for me was just this really important question of, we're pretty programmed and hardwired as a society to be risk averse and to think what happens if something doesn't go wrong and you think, oh God, the house is going to be repossessed and not going to be able to provide for my family. But actually the alternative to switch that and think, if this goes right, where could this lead to? So that was one voice. The other voice was my mother-in-law at the time. She said, look, my father-in-law made the leap many years ago and sort of became quite a successful lawyer and said, you've got to do it. Look, I'll kind of back you. If you ever need any financial help on the mortgage, I'm sure we can make something happen. So I think those two bits of advice really, for me, helped make the decision. And there was a third element at play. During this whole thing, when I took redundancy, I was in really good contact with a company in the Netherlands called Aquatech, and a good kind of colleague, mentor, and friend of mine, Annette Boss. We had many calls where she was driving across the country in the Netherlands in a car, and we're just talking about the kind of the future of the business. And we effectively, over many different phone calls, carved out this 5-year plan for them to bring in a dedicated content director, which was the first time in that company's history. This is a kind of 60-year-old business as part of a much longer-standing exhibition company. And we kind of started mapping out the business plan and the budget that would be required. So when you've got those three elements, it was like a perfect storm to kind of make things happen. So took the redundancy. It was during that 2018 when we had that phenomenal spring and summer. I don't know if you remember it, but it was just beautiful weather. So kind of got in the daytimes out down the beach with the kids, and in the evening registering the domain, Atlantean Media, building the Wix website myself, kind of working with a friend on the logo, editing the video, the promo video to get everything started. And I loved it. It's like kind of the really early stages of the company on the kitchen table, right? Where you can go a million and one directions and you've got to kind of choose something and go with it. And then, and there was no income, no contracts. So I think that was around August timeframe. And then we didn't really start kind of, getting invoices paid until later in the year. So we had to kind of, from taking that redundancy, bridge the gap. So there was a bit of debt accrued. But then very luckily, thanks to Annette and our hard work in Aquatech, we got that contract signed and over the line in October. And actually before that happened, I was requested to go to Tokyo in Japan to cover an event for this organization, and we hadn't even got the contract in place. So you can imagine that, like hardly any money, redundancy, savings had run dry, and suddenly you've got to put a Japan flight on your personal credit card and hotel to kind of get things going for the contract. So when I look back, it was a bit of a blur, and we just kind of had to make it work. And then over the last 4 years, Atlantean's kind of grown quite steadily and organically. We've now got kind of 3 of us on the payroll, if you like, is become the core staff. And then we use a small army of sort of freelance creatives, from writers to videographers, editors, some help on social media. And we kind of I saw this gap in the market, like Sam. I saw you've got these PR creative agencies that are amazing in what they do. On the other side, you've got the kind of the engineering companies that really take their market seriously. and there was this gap in the market for people who could understand the kind of the technology side and the politics and the plants and the processes, and then communicate it kind of creatively in a way that would be respected. And I thought, actually, with a decade of knowledge now in this space, and always looking at everything with a sort of a creative eye and a creative mindset, I thought this is a sweet spot of where I think there's going to be a good market for the company. So, yeah, we've just turned 4 this year in August, and things are going well. I mean, we just obviously don't want to sort of count chickens and all that, but we the reason we're in Sydney right now, and I think a week later I've just about got over the time difference, ready to fly back 23 hours back to London. So we were here for a big event called the IDA World Congress, which is all around. The title of the event was Charting Resilient Solutions. So basically, there was this whole community around desalination and water reuse. So taking water from the sea, purifying it into drinking water, treating wastewater, purifying it so it can be fed to farmers for agriculture, for industry, to utilities as well. And this event is every 2 years, and it cycles around the world. And back when I was at the American company Penwell, we were kind of the video partner when it was in Tianjin, China, Sao Paulo, Brazil, as well as San Diego in California. So we already did quite a lot of work. So once we now, kind of as a free agent and being independent, had a really good call with the sort of Secretary General of the association, and she said, like, we love you to come and do your thing here with the video, social media. And so we sort of partnered an agreement to be able to get me here to Sydney. It's a hell of a long way. Amazing city that I've barely seen of it for a kind of about 2 days, completely jet lagged. But I definitely want to come back. My first time in Australia. So, but yeah, hopefully that gives you a sort of an elevator pitch overview of I think the reason why to do your own thing, the key people involved, and then kind of where we are today.
Thanks for sharing. It's a brilliant story, and it's fascinating for me. That thought process, making the jump, to go and start your own business, to take that jump, to take that risk. There's always elements. There's always going to be some reason not to do it. There's always some reason not to do it. Not business, but there's, like you said, I love the way you spun it and gone. Listen to the people that actually did something. What could be the best thing that could happen? That's the route to take that. Have that plunge. Have the guts, I guess, to go. I'm going to take this opportunity, because look where here you are now, 4 years later in Sydney. Projects.
Absolutely, yeah. I just think we're, society as a whole, we're programmed to sort of, to not take risks, right? You see at the bottom of the statement from the mortgage provider, if you don't keep up with your payments, your house will be repossessed. We're kind of this fear on sometimes. I don't think even education systems and schooling and the way to kind of, study, go to university, get a job, get a pension, work for kind of 40 years plus. It's not conducive to kind of taking a leap and being entrepreneurial, right, and taking the risks, because that's how society functions. But I think once you have taken that leap and made it work, you look back and you think, not necessarily could I have done it sooner, but sort of you encourage more people to certainly do it, for sure. As you've seen as well, you're a seasoned entrepreneur and running many different projects, and can probably look back to the time when you were employed and think, could you have done it earlier, and could you have made the leap a bit earlier as well?
I definitely feel. I often talk about that on the podcast, actually, but I do think to myself, there's two answers to that question. One, I think if entrepreneurship was encouraged more in schools when I was younger, would I have started my business journey as soon as I wouldn't have stayed and done A-levels, I would have come straight out and started a business. But then I also think that everything happens for a reason, and would I have been an experience in life? No, I was as a person as much at that young age as I do now. And I think that I started my business journey 15 years ago nearly, and even then I made mistakes. I've had failures, as I've talked about before, and it's all about that learning. But I think once you've taken that leap, it is very difficult to go back because you've taken that leap and you've seen what. And even though that first business of mine didn't work, it didn't make me think, "Oh, definitely not going to take another leap," because that first one didn't work. You took that leap, okay, yeah, it didn't work, but let's learn from that, and then you go again and look at something else.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's that just relentless commitment and drive to know that you are going to fail and make mistakes, but you've
Yeah,
just got to see that as part of the journey and keep going. And actually, it's a learning curve. And I think you're right. I mean, when I think back, could I have, launched the business before all of those years in the publishing experience? And probably not, because I didn't know the industry, I didn't have the contacts or even have kind of trained those muscles to do it right in terms of creativity, and I wouldn't have been able to come straight out of uni and do it. So almost, I'm really thankful to those companies and those bosses and mentors over the years that gave me the chance as a young guy to kind of take on quite a lot of responsibility, because I think that was necessary to. It's all part of the stepping stones to kind of get to that 2018 where, okay, I've probably got enough experience, contacts and willpower to make it work now. So absolutely, it's got to be the right time to do it. But
Also
yeah, I definitely, yeah.
from a also look at yourself in the sense that from a young age, those opportunities that will present to you, that some people from a young age wouldn't have made. You know, that conference in guitar at 25 years old, and go, I'm going to go out there and I'll go out there. I'll make sure I smash that. And other people maybe that's coming out of their comfort zone a little bit and gone, 25, I'm not really ready for that. Maybe do I jump in and do that? All those, like you said, they're stepping stones on that path, but great experience because I think as an entrepreneur, you're generally open to opportunities. And I think that's one of the key things. So whatever stage you are in your life, if you're open to them opportunities, great things happen, and you can create stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a post on this on LinkedIn quite recently around kind of the perception of not luck, but when people say, "Oh, you're quite lucky,"
Yeah,
and that's
so
actually, well, not even around myself, but just in general. Like I kind of listed out all these attributes. Like those who are lucky, like show up on time, they over prepare, they're polite, they do what they say. All these different, like almost several different elements of,
yeah,
I guess, people that if you overly prepare and do all those things, and naturally, I think you will succeed, and then different opportunities will come your way. But you have to kind of make sure that those foundations are covered, right?
yeah, absolutely. I'm keen to touch on what you talked about about sort of the way society is at the moment, the education system, and it's structured in one way. It's quite archaic, in my opinion, the education system and the way it's sort of structured. And there is that sort of one thing that risk averse and blah blah blah. But do you think entrepreneurship should be encouraged more in schools in education, or what's your thought process? You got young children, right? So what's your thought process for them within the education system? And do you encourage them to go to university or them to start their own business?
Yes, that's a good question, Sam. I mean, I think, like, okay, you hear of these entrepreneurs that have always sort of had a gift or an eye for at school, selling sweets on the side, or the guy, like, wasn't it Alan Sugar, who kind of saw the boxes of the old used video reel at the school, and he thought, actually, there's value in that, what people are seeing as a waste, and then decided to sell it on. So I think you, there is that sort of nature nurture element to this, where it can sort of be ingrained. But I think definitely throughout school, in terms of the kind of the life skills of kind of how to run a business, of how to manage payroll, to bookkeeping, those sort of things, of actually writing a business plan as part of the general sort of curriculum wouldn't go amiss. And I think that would, and you think about, like, I guess the days when we were in education compared to the economy now, especially accelerated by the pandemic, where we are seeing this kind of quiet quitting revolution, and we're seeing more people kind of thinking, I don't need to go above and beyond. And actually, as an employee, there's opportunities out there to make an income on TikTok or YouTube, or to actually order goods from Amazon and set up my own marketplace. So there's so many opportunities for kind of micro entrepreneurs online now. They can go down that route. It's not for anyone, but obviously you still need society to function, you still need doctors, lawyers, nurses, engineers. You
Yeah.
still need everyone that has a part of it, right? That education will naturally lead to. But I think it shouldn't be mandated, but it should certainly be encouraged. And in terms of, yeah, my kids, my two daughters are now 8 and 11. Kind of going on like 16 and 18 almost, I think, in terms of the daily challenges and feedback that I get. You go from being the kind of the hero and worship to like, oh, dad's back sort of thing, right? But I think I mean with those guys, because I mean, like I said earlier, I'm a creative guy, right? So we create content, video, social media, articles. With them at this stage, I just love that they're both so creative, and we kind of follow in that footstep. So they just go away and will like making a book and an animation by themselves, or even like for a kind of school videography and photo competition, Imogen's the oldest one kind of comes for some advice, and we do some work together. And so I think that element of being able to be creative and look at life through a creative lens is definitely something I'm proud to sort of pass on to my two girls. And I think who knows, like in a few years' time where we'll be, but actually that kind of entrepreneurial side, actually taking a risk, I definitely want to pass on to them as well, and just talk them through and eventually bring them on some of these trips if everything's still going well, and kind of let them experience the travel and the different cultures that you get when working around the world.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, look, I want to touch on launched in 2018. Talk to me the last 4 years. Talk to me about some of the challenges, though. I mean, look, in the midst of that, we've had a global pandemic, obviously, as well. Just talk to me about some of the challenges you faced just starting a business as a whole. It's challenging, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, we could talk about this all day, right, Sam? I mean, you've got probably the go-to responses are standard like cash flow, hiring and retaining talent, that type of thing. But I think for me, like to kind of flip it, one of the challenges is to like every single day when you sort of work for yourself, whether you're a freelance contractor or independent consultant or running a small media agency, is every single day being optimistic and knowing that things aren't always going to work out. Some days you do some work and the payment for the invoice doesn't come through for 90 days later, right? For example, on a big sort of European project, it can. So, but you've just got to like every day. And I haven't found it a challenge naturally. I think I'm quite an optimistic sort of person who always looks for solutions, but actually just knowing that things will work out as long as you're working hard and having that mindset that and there's no one to sort of come to your rescue, right? I mean, as from a founder point of view, you've got to make it work. You're on your own. It's not as if you can go to your boss and go, "I'm having a bad day. I'm not sure about this," or it's just like you've got to. With that sort of responsibility, you've just got to have that grit, determination that you'll see everything through and you will deliver, and it's kind of your neck on the line. But at the same time, I think that's quite empowering as well, right? So it's just the buck stops at you, and to kind of make sure stuff gets done. But I mean, obviously, the pandemic was the word that everyone uses, right? Is unprecedented, and so I'll use it again. An unprecedented couple of years, and we were quite fortunate. Being a sort of digital sort of forward company, all of our communication with a lot of the core companies we work with around the world, for example, Aquatech in Netherlands, we switched to video calls very quickly as opposed to me traveling over there twice a month. The same with some other partners and clients. We use the co-working space. I think you've had John Twigg on, the owner of Freedom Works, who was a great guest, by the way. So we had we used to have a smaller space in his other Worthing office. So that was as things were opening up a little bit. So I was one of the few to kind of go back in and actually, because a lot of events as well pivoted from physical gatherings to virtual events. They needed a lot of help on that organisation and moderating, so we could kind of support there. But I think the one thing is, like during that 2 years, I'm really proud that we didn't have to sort of furlough anyone. We didn't have to sort of take any funding or grants from the government, and we just kind of got through it having a small company reserve and making sure everything was going. So I'm quite proud of the fact that we could just keep it going. Obviously, a few others aren't as fortunate, and many companies are no longer here and struggle. So I'm always kind of, think that we're quite lucky to be in that position. But it was just a random time, wasn't it, man? I mean, as you know, like you've got small kids, and to suddenly in the house, you're going from parent and small business owner into an educator and a teacher. And I think I always remember back, I had to try and do a maths lesson for my two daughters. So they would have been kind of 6, 7, and 9 and 10. And I sat them down at the breakfast table, and within about 15, 20 minutes, I had one tell me I was the worst teacher they've ever had. and the other one sort of said that she hates the lesson and this is the worst school ever. So I was like, well, this is going really well, isn't it? So luckily, my other half, Alex, was a teacher, and now she works in school as head of special educational needs. So she's amazing in kind of getting the lesson plans and making sure and trying to kind of cater for different kids. So I said to her, I'm going to do the art lessons and the creative lessons and the design technology lessons, right? That's my bag. Anything where you require kind of structure and discipline for a full-on curriculum, that will be your bag. And we kind of, like everyone, it was really tough, and we battled through it. But I remember you have these days where, do you remember the first lockdown where it was beautiful weather and came down from the office upstairs, and the girls are kind of playing on the deck and Alex is outside peeling some vegetables to make a homemade soup, and I was like, we've almost gone back in time, and it's almost like that scene from the film where the birds are coming down and landing, and some unicorns in the distance. And this is like utopia, man. And then a couple of hours later, the kids are screaming, pull each other's hair out, and then you've missed a couple of back-to-back Zoom calls, and then suddenly you get this hit of reality of this just weird time. And I don't think we'll ever probably experience that again in our lives, where you weren't allowed to go out of the house. Everyone was just scared to death of catching this, and we had no idea of at the time of the severity of it. We weren't vaccinated, and we're trying to home educate and work from home as well. And it it was a crazy time. But I think when I look back, there were some positives out of it. As a family, we managed to, as a lot of people did, explore the local areas a bit more, find some new walks because we were limited to what we could do. But crazy time. So that was a bit of a challenge, but luckily the company kept going, and
it's great
being now back in Sydney.
Listen to the business. I guess just starting a business in 2000 and actually running it for 2 years, and whatever industry you're in, and obviously, like you said, with being in the digital space, that you're able to adapt and be involved in that a lot more. But just to have got a business through the first 2 years, being a strong enough position to not have to take funding, to not have to furlough and keep going through the pandemic and come out the other side and be in a strong position. That's got to be seen as a big success, though, for yourself as when you first start that journey and go, wow, we've been chucked with this. No one knows what's going to happen in the world with a global pandemic, and yet I've managed to get our business to a stage where we're strong enough to survive this. That's
absolutely. And I always sort of feel quite blessed because we were lucky at the time. We had kind of handful of sort of core partners and clients. I mentioned the amazing team over in Amsterdam, the Aquatech and Net and Annalie and the team who carried on working with them as a kind of a long-term retainer, and a handful of other businesses. So that maintained throughout that period, and I think it gave us that stability. We knew there was that kind of longer term income coming in, as opposed to sort of chasing bits here and there. So quite fortunate in that. But I also think that's the business model that we set up, is to have these kind of long term 6, 12, 18 month kind of content as a service retainers, where we sort of lock in and agree partnerships with companies to deliver so much content or advisory services, and there's kind of a fee every month. So I knew that if we could keep those going through this pandemic, that it would be enough to kind of pay the bills and keep everything going as well. So, but yeah, crazy days, man, crazy days. I'm just glad that now being back at this event is the first time due to the pandemic that it's kind of after 3.5 years. This community came together here in Sydney, so you can really just, given that Australia was so severely locked down, you could just see how happy people were to be back together again, like old friends, old colleagues. It was just this like magic in the air, and it was almost like a celebratory reunion of this business that's going to urgently be needed, kind of moving forward.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And look, listening to you talk about homeschooling period, and I'm similar to you. Like I look on that period as tough as it was. Obviously, from our business, that really struggled. But I still look at it from the time it was. It's time you spent with the kids that I would never have had previously. I struggled with the homeschooling. I'm not going to lie. Similar similar roles. Like my wife's she's a solicitor, so very structured. They went back after she taught them, and we got an email from the school going, "It's come on so well." Well, I taught them not so much, but they learned how to cook. I taught them to cook. So life skills, mate. Life
There you
skills.
go.
So
I think
we've all got.
that's a really good point. Yeah. Like, I mean, as much as I joke about the kids arguing and the challenges of homeschooling, I think you're absolutely right. Like that time to spend together as a family, and there was no travel, people weren't commuting, and it proved that really the whole working structure of people commuting to an office to be behind a computer 9 to 5 is completely flipped out of its head, and that transition needed to happen quicker than what it did. The pandemic just purely accelerated it. So I think it made people, as you mentioned, like really evaluate their kind of work-life balance and how they could spend more time with their family and still continue their jobs as well.
I love it. Well, mate, look, we couldn't not talk about podcasts on the 24-hour podcast. So we obviously both share a passion for that medium. And you've had, I think you're in season 5 now, I think, of the stream. Is that right? Are you coming up to season 5?
That's right, Sam. Yeah, we're launching season 5 at the end of the month. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So, I mean, talk to me about that, and like obviously being involved in content as you are, and digital content. Like, how does that sort of content compare with like the engagement that you get from podcasting compared to other content?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, like content is a kind of a journey. There's been an absolute boom especially in like the water market. I think when we started back in 21, there was a handful, and since then, someone listed there's about almost 20 different podcasts just in that water market space alone. Right, there was a boom, but I think I absolutely love it because we've done so many kind of video interviews over the years, and I think with podcasting you can just get to this deeper level of conversation, and also from a listener point of view. I'm a huge fan of the Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. I think you are as well, and you tend to connect those with certain things that you do, whether it's walking the dog, or for me it's when I'm cleaning the family bathroom and I can put on an episode of Stephen Bartlett and listen. So you tend to connect. I think podcasting, we've heard the same thing about us. People connect it as a habit to something in their lives where they almost look out for it to listen to, whether it's like their twice a week run or walking the dog or kind of commuting. I think that's the beauty of podcasting more than any other feedback, is you can just listen more intently than anything else because there's no sort of visual distractions. But for us, I mean, it goes back to like, I remember this dinner I had with my now co-host and sort of mentor and business partner, Will Sarney. We were in Amsterdam for an event that we organised the Innovation Forum. We went out for a dinner. And granted, we probably had too many cocktails. And we kind of just said, we're both a fan of Joe Rogan and his style, which before the move to Spotify, I could just love the level of depth he could get with his guests on so many different topics, from aliens through to new technology to Elon Musk and Tesla. And we just kind of thought at the time that some of the content coming out in the market we both worked in was pretty corporate, was pretty scripted, was pretty, not very sort of risky. So we went away and we just started thinking of this thing called codename Operation Rogan, to kind of think, how could we rethink a kind of podcast? So we came up with this plan, and we still stick to the tagline today. We use it as part of the intro, and that's unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversations with guests who challenge the status quo, with a bias fraction in the world of water and beyond. And that's kind of like everything we want to do. So we don't script it. The conversation can go many different ways, and it's kind of my job, like yours, sometimes to try and bring it back on piece. And we're quite selective with our guests, people that are, quite literally movers and shakers, and they're kind of challenging the tradition, they're challenging the status quo, they're entrepreneurial, or very entrepreneurial. They have their own businesses, startups, or they're investors, or they're kind of individuals within a water utility that kind of seem to be a bit more progressive and taking risks. And so, probably like yourself, when you look back at the season one first few episodes of season one compared to where we are now, even as a podcast host, you've evolved so much. Like, I think it's a good exercise to not only learn about other people, but also learn about your style as well. And so, we wanted to visually just come up with like a kind of a vinyl cover of the guests and myself and the co-hosts around the stream. And every season that changes based on the influence of a favorite band or song that we like. And so we've done 4 seasons. We've had some pretty amazing guests, from like the head of sustainability at companies like McDonald's through to a NASA astronaut, through to like the head of innovation at water utilities, to kind of share their story. And we try to always, I think, and I'm a big fan of your work as well, Sam, how you try to find people's like origin story. And and the tagline of your one is like, everyone has a story to tell, and I totally agree with that, right? I think if you give them the platform, the right question, everyone has something interesting to say. So we tried to get people not to talk about the widget they're selling. We don't want them to sell, or even kind of their company too much. It's more about them as the individual, and then actually what they believe. And then we try to have fun as well. I mean, we put a warning label on the cover of it, right? And sometimes we're drinking whiskey with the guests, or expletives drop in and the swear words. But the main thing is, I think what I love about that is having kind of co-host to spar with, and kind of a partner in that, so we can kind of share ideas and bounce off each other, and that really helps. So for season 5, we wanted to sort of change things up a little bit, and we went with like this Baby Driver kind of theme cover that's all like around like a kind of movie almost, with the kind of main protagonists. There were obviously no guns and that sort of thing, but instead of the guns we had like the old school podcast mic. And so we're going to be launching soon the Knowledge Partners, kind of academic and research bodies, and then we've got impact partners, and then also commercial partners. So the team from Atlantean, like Andrew Godfrey and Lily Chen as well, are working away on that. So excited to be launching it. But I think when I think about like the impact of podcasting, I did at one stage kind of think, is this a trend accelerated by the pandemic that's just going to fade away? I mean, you see audio-based platforms like Clubhouse. I don't know if you ever got involved in any of the Clubhouse sessions. I remember it was quite like exclusive and at the start, and then everyone and their mums were on it. It changed really quickly, but that was an audio-based platform. People were tuning in, and we hosted a few sessions on there, and obviously Twitter afterwards have launched their Spaces, which is similar around like an audio-based piece of content, but it doesn't. Some of those things have quietened down, but the podcasting, from looking at the recent data that Stephen Bartlett shared, just seems to be really still accelerating and increasing. But I think my main advice, and when I look back, is like, you've got to be in it for the long haul. Like, we see a lot of sometimes companies pop up, hey, we're launching a podcast, and I say to them, but why? And they kind of go, oh, wow. It's almost like when the iPhone came out and there was the App Store, every boardroom was like, we need an app. And it's like, well, why do you need an app? Go back and ask that question, why? Like, how is that going to strengthen your brand, and what's the purpose of it? The same with a podcast. Always ask that question, like, why? And what's it going to do for your organization? And don't underestimate, I think, the time it takes to produce, to research, to schedule, to do the branding, and afterwards to kind of slice and dice the content multiple ways to drive engagement. It's an entire machine that needs the right people to kind of keep it going for the long term. But
So I
yeah,
totally agree.
it's yeah.
It's a massive. I totally agree. Like that, it's blown up since the pandemic. I went to the podcast show in London earlier this year, and the statistics they showed of the growth has been phenomenal. But the trend is exactly that the growth's going to only continue. That's where they see it going. And all the big players were there. You know, YouTube, Spotify, Acast, and all the big players, Sony within that industry, just absolutely phenomenal. But to see that growth is amazing, and to be part of it, it's just I think similar to you, I guess. Like, I just genuinely love it. No, you have them conversations, just genuinely love it, and I think that's where, like, not knowing where that conversation sometimes going to go, and it goes off in different tangents. But for me, it's like an education. Like, that's how I've seen it over the nearly 50 episodes that I've done now, and I've added another 24 in the last to today.
I was going to say that's one hell of a sort of content production rate in one day, right?
Yeah, we've done a lot, but it's amazing. It's something I'm passionate about. But you're exactly right. Like, look at Stephen Bartlett's one, even when he showed that thing, and literally 0 people listened to it, and then 10 million now listen to it, and like the quite within the first 2 years.
This was for years, for absolute years, until eventually it kind of took off. And obviously, he had the benefit of being on Dragon's Den and becoming more of this kind of known, like, entrepreneurial sort of celebrity figure. But I think one of the reasons why you're good at it as well, Sam, is just the ability to listen and generally be interested in what your sort of guests have to say. And I think, again, as a society, generally, a lot of people are not amazing listeners. They kind of wait for something to be said as a gap, as opposed to actually generally listening to what people are saying and then responding. And I think that's the art to hosting a good podcast, is asking the right questions, but also just the ability to listen intently and then respond and ask questions. And yeah, you're great at it as well.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And look, mate, it's been fascinating. I'm conscious of time. I know you've obviously got a flight to catch, and like I said, I don't want to lose you. But we're coming towards the end. Before we do our quick fire question, just tell me what does the future hold for you?
As a quick fire question.
I know this is before we go into the quick fire ones.
Right, okay, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, I think this space with which we serve, right? I mean, our kind of, I guess, talking professionally, right? As a kind of business owner, I mean, we sort of our mantra is to connect people to water through creative content, and I think what we want to do is just generally help people to overcome apathy towards water as a whole. And people, it's widely misunderstood by the general public, and I think until nations start running dry, it's something that's historically been taken for granted and totally underappreciated. So I think if through our work and different means of like creative content, if we can get, just young people interested in the water topic to then pursue a career down in water, or even just get people who had no idea that kind of technology exists, where you can take water from the air and turn it into drinking water, but just make these things engaging and accessible. I think as a career objective, I think that'd be pretty cool if we can just get more people generally interested to help solve the water crisis. I feel like as a creative, that's somewhere where I can help. So I think we want to continue to do that in definitely the next few years. And then obviously from a kind of family point of view is to hope that my 2 girls stay happy and healthy, and eventually kind of do more traveling with them as well. So, but do you know what I mean? I think pre-pandemic, everyone could give you like this 5, 10, 15-year objective, but I think that's kind of thrown everything out of the way. And so actually, if we can just know what we're going to do next year and 2 years ahead, I mean, we've got to be happy for that, right? Who knows what, especially when you look at like the political climate and the Ukraine-Russia war and supply chain crisis. Oh man, it's enough to kind of turn you into a negative spiral. So we can just think at least, okay, what's happening? Let's work out what's happening for Christmas, and maybe 2023 and 2024. Yeah, and make sure I don't miss the flight. That'd be a win, wouldn't it? So.
Right, I totally get it. I think that what's fascinating, just listening, and not listening to your business journey, but the business that you run and the impact that you're having. on on climate change in the world. And I think so much of it's down to education, and I think by creating the content that you do around that, around water sustainability, and like you say, educating that next generation to hopefully make a change, and that's leading a business with a real purpose. That's something to should be really proud of, mate, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that purpose, we definitely in that space, but I think now 4 years later and kind of going through your own company, we're just going through a kind of website redevelopment and looking at the brand and the history. It's quite cathartic, and kind of when you actually go through and you think, actually, where are we today where we were in kind of 2018? Actually, that purpose of trying to connect people to water with creative content is where I finally feel we've dialed it in. But I'm sure, like any company, in another 4 years, if we have a conversation, it might tweak. But I certainly think for the next at least until 2030, that's a pretty good objective to have. So.
Love it. Awesome, mate. Well, look, we're gonna do the quick fire questions. So here we go. First one. One piece of advice do you give to your 18-year-old self?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the standard answer would be to kind of, go for it, to borrow Nike's tagline, just do it. But I'm going to, again, try and flip this, and I would actually say stretch. That might seem like a bit of a random answer, right? But I think never, ever take health for granted. When you're 18, you think you're invincible and you can conquer the world and your body will get over stuff. But actually now, at the age of 38, I start to stretch twice a day, only because of a bad sporting injury that reared its head. But I'd kind of, for my kids when they turn 18, is never ever underestimate the power of stretching twice a day and making part of your routine.
Love that. That's the first one of them answers I've heard, mate. I love that.
Yeah, I know, because I thought everyone's going to say, just do it and don't. And I thought the standard answer there is to back yourself and don't doubt yourself and things will work out. And I was trying to think, okay, let's flip it around a little bit. So one word, stretch.
Love it. Love it. Next one. Who has been the biggest inspiration throughout your life and why?
Yeah, good question. I mean, obviously, like the role models of your parents is a given, right? I think that's kind of that stability in your life and the different traits they bring and family. But I think from this is a kind of business podcast, right? So I think one of my mentors back in when I was kind of early mid-20s in media was an amazing lady called Geraldine Faulkner, who was, I guess, the sunset of her career and due to be retired. So really experienced, award-winning journalist, ruled with a bit of a, I'm not sure if she's listening, but ruled with a bit of a sort of iron fist. And she had this young upstart, cocky kind of 22, 23-year-old to try and whip into shape. So she took me under her wing and I just learned so much from her. And that ability, she's one of those rare people that could be the loveliest person in the world and speak to anyone, but at the same time, you didn't really want to mess with her. She could jump between the two camps, and I think it's such an efficient way to get stuff done. So I try to think I'm quite similar. Like, we'll talk to anyone, full respect, give everyone the time of the day, but at the same time, stubborn. I like to think a stubborn optimist to get stuff done as well.
Good times. And recommend a book or a podcast that to our listeners has had an impact on you.
So yeah, we've obviously mentioned the podcast Diary of the CEO. For a book, probably a couple, if I will. One is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I read that a couple of months ago, which I know it's always highly recommended, but generally makes you question everything you kind of do in your life and how that becomes habitual. And then one I finished a few weeks ago was 4,000 Weeks by a guy called Oliver Burkeman. It's all around time management. I mean, you're a busy guy as well, Sam, and we're always trying to squeeze every minute out of every day and figure out when it's best to do emails or to do family stuff. And I think this is a guy who for years tried to review every single time management strategy until it kind of boiled down to a point. And my summary from the book is that you're always going to have stuff on your plate because we're always trying to, okay, if I have 20 emails in my inbox, I clear the 20, I feel good, my plate's clear. But the thing is, from sending 20 emails, you're going to get 20 responses, so it just fills back up again. And one of the outcomes from the book is just to be comfortable knowing that there's always unfinished business to kind of take care of. So yeah, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, really recommend it.
I'm definitely, that's on my list because a couple of people mentioned that to me, and yeah, it's definitely on my list. So I'll have that one, mate. Look, final one. What is your one rule for living a fulfilled life?
Travel, I think. Yeah, travel, and not everyone is fortunate to travel, so there is that. But I mean, if any opportunity to kind of get outside your comfort zone, go to countries, meet, experience new cultures, experience new people, new ways of thinking. Um, what's the quote? It's like, if the world's a book, those who haven't travelled kind of stay on the first page, right? And I think from backpacking and doing the stuff across Europe to eventually being fortunate to work with a lot of companies around the world, um, I just absolutely love it, and it's definitely broadened my mindset. So again, travel. I'm giving you one word answer here, Sam. Like stretch and travel.
Mate, these are gold.
It's
These are
like
gold.
the bullet point. There you go. Golden nuggets in one word.
It's gold,
Yeah.
mate. Listen, I'm so grateful for you jumping on. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you this year and meeting you. And the first time I met you, I mentioned this, and you said, "I'll back you up. I'll come on," and you do it. And look, you're the other side of the world, and you've still done it for me, and I'm truly grateful for that. So thanks for your support, mate. It's been a brilliant conversation. Great catching up with you, and look, have a safe trip back, and let's catch up for a beer when you get back home.
Yeah, sounds good, Sam. Listen, again, kudos to you to do this. 24 guests in 24 hours is no mean feat, and it's an amazing charity as well, the Rocking Horse. So kudos for doing this, and thanks for the invitation. Yeah, well, I'll see you on the other side. Hopefully, they're not too jet lagged as well.
Top man, brilliant, mate. Good to see you. Safe trip
All right,
back, and that is a wrap.
appreciate it.
Cheers,
Cheers,
mate.
Sam. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Bye
All
bye.
the best.